why house rules for D&D are perfectly okay, and I'm going to give you my top 5 today on Dungeon Craft. Welcome to Dungeon Craft. I'm Professor DungeonMaster, coming to you from Dungeon University, and this channel is about playing the ultimate game of D&D and other role-playing games.
And I'm Deathbringer. Subscribe and click the bell icon so you'll be informed when we upload new videos every week.
So today we're talking about modding, hacking, house rules, whatever you want to call it, why I do it, and why you should consider doing it too. And I'm wearing my +1 vest of protection today because I'm expecting some incoming flack, and I hope you don't mind if it gets a little ranty. In the comment section, I always see people asking, why do you want to change the rules? If you want to change them so much, why don't you just play a different game? Or why are you changing the combat rules? If you hate combat, why don't you play something else? Who are you to question the sacred scripture that the paragons of game design have bestowed upon us, mere mortals? We're talking about Hasbro here. They're the company that makes Hungry Hungry Hippos. People assume that the employees of Wizards of the Coast are walking around the offices wearing lab coats and they have degrees in gameology. They don't. They're working in cubicles to deadlines. They're average people just like you and me. All this is suggestions on how to play make-believe, and once it is mine, once I own it, I can do whatever I want with it. The whole concept that you have to play with your toys the way the manufacturer says is the same as my son coming up to me and saying, "Hey, Dad, what do you think of my spaceship?" And I tell him, "This doesn't look like a TIE fighter. Do you think you can do a better job than the professional imaginers at the Lego Corporation? If you don't want to make what's on the box, why don't you just play with Duplos?" House rules have a long-standing tradition in the D&D game, and what is a house rule today often works its way and becomes an official rule tomorrow. Rules like critical hits, which date back to 1975, but didn't make it into the game as an optional rule until the 2nd edition. And then it eventually became a non-optional standard rule by the 4th or 5th edition. Advantage and disadvantage evolved from the Avenger class in the 4th edition. And I was using a variant of inspiration for at least 5 years prior to the publication of the 5th edition. What? I'm taping Dungeon Craft. Oh boy, here we go.
I just want to tell you that I won. I get Joseph's room. Let's go. Let's go.
All right.
I won. I also get a futon, which means gaming setup. I won. I told you.
His brother's joining the army, so he's getting his room. I wanted the room for Dungeon Craft, but I guess the studio will be in the smaller room. Don't worry, I'll have the last laugh. Just watch to the end of the video. Anyway, where was I? Well, Mike Merles. Mike Merles, lead designer of the D&D team, uses an alternative initiative system where rogues roll a d4, fighters a d8, and magic users a d12. And this is a really cool way to randomize casting times. You could potentially eliminate them altogether and just turn them into a die roll. And Chris Perkins doesn't play with spell ranges at all. He uses zone terrain. So D&D's top people have house rules of their own, and what is a house rule today may end up canon tomorrow. Behind me on the shelves, games like Dungeon Crawl Classics, The Black Hack, Dungeon World, Index Card RPG, they're all variants of Dungeons & Dragons, and I consider them the same game. They speak the same universal language. If you look at a character sheet, you're going to see AC, HP, Strength, Intelligence, Dexterity, and any game that has those elements and uses a 20-sided die is Dungeons & Dragons to me. D&D is a living game played by living people. My group is different from your group, so hacks and house rules are a way to tailor your game to your audience. When I run games for young children, the concept of rolling a 20-sided die and adding 3, that can be major computation for a young kid. So I'll just say you need a 12 to hit the goblin. I've also used Dungeons & Dragons to teach English language learners how to speak English, and a concept like dexterity can be difficult to explain. So on the character sheet, I just simply replaced it with a symbol, a lightning bolt, to indicate speed. My longest running group consists mostly of women, and they play for story, not for rules or tactics. Most have never read a rule book in their lives. Instead, they explain in natural language what they want to do, and I tell them what they need to roll on a 20-sided die. You won't hear a lot of game jargon like attack of opportunity or action surge at our game table. They just explain what their character wants to do, and I tell them what they need to roll on a 20-sided die. And because of everyone's very busy schedules, I have 2 nurses. One, Veronica, who's working on the front lines of the COVID crisis. Veronica, you are the real hero. we often don't get to play more than once a month or every 2 months. And we only have 2 to 3 hours to play a game. So that means compressing rules like proficiency bonuses and ability score bonuses, rolling them into simple modifiers, and a simplified character sheet that's only got the basics, armor class, hit points, and the 6 ability scores. And we also use a simplified experience points system that doesn't need a lot of bookkeeping and character updating. So those are some of the adjustments I have to make. And I think the fan base of this channel is a lot of people in the same boat. They're kind of my age, or they have very busy players with busy lives, and they want to play a cool game of Dungeons & Dragons, but they don't have all the time to wade through mountains of rules. They just want to cut to the chase and get to the game. So here are some hacks and house rules that I use at my table. I've been using them for the last year. It's kind of like the top 5 list, and it's changed a little bit since last year. So here they are. Number 5 is use an alternative experience point system. This isn't even actually a house rule, it's a rule. Page 261 of the Dungeon Master's Guide says that instead of using the experience point system, it's perfectly legal to use an alternative, including encounter-based XP, milestone-based XP, or storyline-driven XP. Let's face it, the experience point system is really wonky. 300 experience points to get to level 2, but 900 to get to level 3, and weird jumps from 6,500 to 14,000 between levels 5, 6, and 7, and you may not want to do all that paperwork after the game is done. Just ask yourself, how fast do you want the players to level up? Let's say the average game is 3 to 4 sessions before a character levels up, and you're going to have 3 to 4 encounters in that session that's going to be worth experience points. Well, that means that's just 16 points, 16 encounters. So you could set the number for gaining a level at anywhere from 15 to 20 and hand out 3 to 4 points per session. And I like this because you can use this variant where at the end of the session you can tell the players, okay, vote for the MVP award. I used to call it the best role player award, but that would kind of restrict it to that person in your group that loves to do the hammy accents. So instead, the MVP award, that person that thought of the great idea or brought something extra to the game to make it special and memorable, they can get 1 extra point. That 1 extra point can really be a great incentive. At the end of the night, it ends with applause, and the players end on an up note. I also like milestones, putting in some sort of quest or task the characters have to complete before they level up. And the reason I like them is because it allows you more leeway as the Dungeon Master to be a gatekeeper, to prevent the characters from getting too powerful too quickly. By 7th, 8th level, spells get really powerful, and they can alter the course of the plot in ways that an inexperienced game master will find it difficult to anticipate. And so many of the comments on For DMs Only, which is a Facebook group I belong to, are about younger, inexperienced game masters who've got players they've got 15th or 20th level characters. That's really overwhelming for a person without that much experience. So milestones are a way to apply the brakes so the players don't get too much power too quickly. And by that I mean power that the game master doesn't know how to handle. So I've got this really popular video where I suggested doing away with initiative altogether because that's the way it was done with the original White Box, and that's the way Dungeon World does it. But that's a little radical for most people, and the change I would recommend, though, if you want a game that's just a little faster, is group initiative. Everyone takes their turn clockwise from the Dungeon Master. So the players could sit themselves in whatever order they wish. So if they want to put the rogue closest to the Dungeon Master so they go first and make a sneak attack, they can do that. So for the people that say I hate combat because I don't like the initiative rules, actually I love combat. I want to get to the combat part. I don't want to see this and have to switch these around. It's just too complex for me. I want to see who's next in the batting order so I can transition more easily and I have a better idea of where we are in the round. Plus, if you choose someone to roll the initiative die, it adds an extra dimension of fun because for one moment, the players are all concentrated not on their individual actions, but on that action of that one player who's rolling, and they're rooting for them to get a high number. And when it comes up, like natural 20, there's going to be cheers and high fives all around. And if they roll a 2 or a 3, there's going to be an overwhelming sense of dread, which is dramatic nonetheless. 3. Player-facing combat. Many modern games like the Black Hack have player-facing combat. In a traditional game, the Game Master rolls on behalf of the monsters. In a player-facing game, the players make all the rolls. So follow me here. Let's say the players are fighting orcs, and the orc needs a 15 to hit that character's armor class. 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. So instead of rolling, say to the player, you have to beat a 6 on a 20-sided die. That's 7 or better to avoid getting hit. This is so much more engaging, especially if you play with teenagers, because it allows the players to be rolling all the time, not just when it's their turn for 6 seconds or so. And you're not changing a single rule. The chance of the orc hitting, 30%, is exactly the same. All you're doing is changing which hands are rolling the randomizing instrument, the dice. One caveat, you can't use this in conjunction with the simultaneous initiative because it gets way too confusing. So I had to choose one or the other, and I'm leaning more towards player facing because it's just more die rolling for the players. It means more excitement. 2. Roll to cast spells. Virtually every D&D variant, even the old school ones are not that old school because most of them use this rule. You have to roll to cast a spell. You could set the difficulty in one or two ways. I tend to do it by looking at the monster's armor class. Part of that armor class of that ogre is the ogre defending himself, moving around, swinging his giant club or axe, narrowly missing this magic user as they desperately trying to remember and repeat word for word this long incantation. So this is kind of baking a concentration check right into the roll. The other way to do it is the 5e hardcore mode way, which just says you gotta roll a 10. We also play with natural 1 as a critical spell failure, much like 5 Torches Deep or 5e hardcore mode, and something terrible happens. You roll the 20-sided die again and determine how big of a miscast it was. It could be the wizard's hair falls out or turns white, or she blows herself up altogether. You might ask, well, what kind of wizard wants this system? And the answer is my friend Veronica. She loves that random risky element that it could result in someone's death, and the wizard is like sort of playing with plutonium. We also don't play with spell slots. You can cast a spell as many times as you want, knowing that that 1 is an ever-present looming possibility. Now, I understand if you don't want to play with the critical spell failure, you could just say, okay, you got to roll a 10 to cast the spell, and if you don't, the spell doesn't go off. But the thing about the Vantian spell system I don't like is that it works so precisely that spells work almost like a computer program, like they go off exactly the same way, the same time. Adding that random element to Magic makes it a lot of fun, and it allows that player to do what everybody else has fun doing, rolling dice. There's nothing like getting a natural 20 when you rolled a fireball. And the final house rule is pure hit dice. This one comes from 5e hardcore mode from Runehammer, Hanker and Fernail over there. So in the past I've capped hit points, but he's come up with a way better solution, which is straight pure hit dice. You roll for hit points on every level, including 1. You don't start with the maximum, and you don't add your Constitution bonus when you level up. Constitution's still valuable. You still use it for poison saving throws and swimming and running and all that stuff, but it doesn't grant you extra hit points. This means a 5th, 6th level fighter is probably only going to have 25 to 30 hit points. This is a good option if you want a game that is a little more deadly. Not too deadly, but you're just taking it up a notch. And I recommend that you have your players vote on it. Hey, do you want to go hardcore mode on this game? Just like a video game. Some people, once they've mastered the basic rules, they want to do that. They want the challenge. And if your players are up to it, pure hit dice is a great way to achieve that. People on Facebook group are always asking, how do you scale the monsters down? Well, you're going to use your monster manual. It's so easy. You just take that first number, the total hit points. It's going to say 59 for an ogre, and then parentheses next to it, 21. That's how much it derives from its Constitution bonus. Well, you just eliminate the Constitution bonus and you get 38. That's how many hit points the ogre has, which is still more than ogres had when I was a kid. They only had 24, 25 hit points. Now you keep all the damage and attacks the same, but now the monsters and the players are scaled down in proportion. This is a great rule to use if you want to speed the game or create a game that is faster and more suspenseful. Players aren't going to take it for granted that they have 78 hit points and they can just walk into a room and not die. They're going to think carefully before they enter combats, which leads to a much more tense game. House rules, modding, hacking, it's not just something that experts in games do. Anyone can do it. Most of us have house rules, and that's perfectly okay. Just because you're changing the rules doesn't mean you're not playing Dungeons & Dragons. Now, if you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up. like and share on Facebook, social media. You could put your comments below. Also below, you'll find links to our Facebook group and our Patreon, where I put up things like critical spell failures, in case you're interested. Once again, for DungeonCraft, I'm Professor DungeonMaster. I'll see you at the table. And until then, may all your rolls be 20s.
Deathbringer again. Click on these videos to watch more DungeonCraft while I play with Michael's Lego collection.
What do you mean by the last laugh?